It's the conversation. It's the conversation. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Let's go. Let's go. No filter, no restrictions. You about to get my opinion in its purest form. So my words, don't try to spin them. What I said is what I said, and what I said I meant it. The gloves are off now when I'm coming out swinging. So engage in verbal combat, but you better be ready. Cause this here for me is light work, even if the topic's heavy. I'm ready for it all with no running from nothing. You just take the time to digest what I put in, no rushing. But time is moving, don't waste it. You want the real, come and face it. Come sit and talk to me if you want it straight without a chaser. And it might burn a little when you step on up to taste it, but it's nothing harsh, I promise. Just a little conversation.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of The Conversation with Harold and Dave. This talk show will focus on talking about things that are happening in our community and around the country, sometimes around the world, whether historically, current, or things we look forward to happen in the future. And I am here with my awesome co-host, Harold and Dave, and we're going to take a couple seconds in our first episode for just both of them to introduce themselves to you and give you a small window of their background. So go ahead, Harold.
Good day, everyone. My name is Harold Ford. Again, I'm an educator, 23 years in the public school system. I'm also the first vice president of the South Bay branch of the NAACP. And as far as my background is concerned, I've been from business owner to acquisition of a business to selling it off to an offshore company to also obtaining a number of degrees from the University of Florida International University, and currently working on a doctorate at Nova, Southeastern University. So I come just ready to engage and prayerfully learn as well as teach.
Okay, awesome. When I grow up, I want to be just like you, Harold. Let's hear from our other co-host, Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Hayes, and I'm a professor for Troy University. I teach international relations for Troy. Troy is neither, everything's my opinion. Troy has nothing to do with this. So, okay, that's my disclaimer. And otherwise, though, I'm in Fayetteville. I was hired to teach on post, and so I have a background teaching Army officers here, which is good because I was an Army officer way back in the day. Reagan was president. So I have a little bit of a military background in both the active duty and Army National Guard. And I got my PhD from University of Rochester, and I studied at the Hoover Institution for a while. And that's pretty much me. I'm just here in Fayetteville with my dogs who are walking in and out here as we do this.
Well, maybe they understand this show is going to be very entertaining, so they're trying to get first dibs on hearing what we're talking about. And I'm your host, Keone, owner of Keone Productions. As you can see behind me, I was a military veteran myself for 20 years. I have an MBA in human services, a bachelor's in organizational psychology, and an MBA in healthcare services. So we're going to get started on our first topic today, and it's a word or words that people have heard of, but a lot of people don't understand it. They don't understand the need, what it means, and that's critical race theory. That's been a hot topic recently, and I would like both of you to explain to the masses, what is critical race theory, Harold?
Okay, from my understanding, critical race theory is a theoretical premise where a group of individuals following the civil rights movement began to look at America and its institutions to see if there was race that existed within those institutions. Was there bias? Was there anything that was race related or race involved that caused those matters to treat one sector of the population or one group of citizens differently than another?
Okay, awesome. And Dave, sorry about that, Harold. Thank you.
That's okay.
And Dave, what's your take on the definition of critical race theory?
Well, much as Harold said, it's scholarship that is largely done in the legal realm, looking at systemic racism in institutions. From my perspective, I come from an international political economy background, and it seems to me a cousin to a lot of institutional analysis that goes on about whether the laws in a country economically favor one group or one set of interests over another. So not necessarily race or the U.S. So I would see it as part of that. But also I see it as a manufactured issue that is being brought out by the Republican Party, that, what it is isn't important as what people think it is and what they can do by managing what they're calling a conflict campaign against it.
So that brings me. So is there a need for it? Because when those words are spoken, you get eye rolls. There's some people that give you the eye rolls. There's sometimes the same people that give you the eye roll when you hear words like affirmative action. So is there a need to discuss critical race theory? Anyone can answer that. That's fine.
Well, I'll go on that. I think that I think the problem is that it sounds bad to people who, the Republican Party has a very strong populist movement in it, right? We're seeing, and the essence of populism is that you believe there is an elite that is thwarting the interests of a virtuous public. And the idea that somebody's out there teaching kids that America is racist, that's about all they get from it. It goes directly to, so it fits them. And so it's a bit unfortunate. At the same time, though, from a study of economics, there's just no way you shouldn't be studying how the laws are used to protect one group of interests from another. And whether the basis be class or race or some other differentiation of social groups, this is an important thing. And everybody suffers from it. After the civil rights movement, the economic well-being of everybody in the South improved. So it is something that I think is very vital to study, but it's blown up.
What do you think about Dave's comments here?
No, and I agree. And part of the issue that I wrestle with is this has been around more than 40 years, and we just started talking about it, 2 years ago. So, considering that it's been technically on the books for that long, and no one's even talked about it. And even those that are out there trying to misplain it, not explain it, but misplain it, they're the ones that they've actually never read any critical race theorist or the actual book that's centered around critical race theory. So if they've never even gone on it, and they've basically gone on just the buzzwords critical race theory with a stronger emphasis on race, that's where my whole issue is. And they're really preying on the public, who also has no idea what it is, and trusting that they won't do the research or won't do the necessary study so that they can understand it for themselves. And now when you're relying on people to tell you what something is, obviously they can misplain it as much as they want, how many times they want, and take you in totally different directions than what its true intent is. When you're looking at systems, you're looking at the education system, you're looking at the judicial system, you're looking at these large things, even our economic system, and how they've been built in this country, and do they favor one particular group of people over another? So no, I agree. And the reason why we're getting the animosity is because people themselves have entrusted others more so than relying on themselves to do the necessary work and researching what it is so that they will know for themselves whether the information they're being fed is valid or invalid.
I call it the gift and the curse of the internet, not to speak ill or over praise the internet, because the internet can be used to make things more relevant. Like you said, we've just been talking about it for the last 2 years. 2 years ago, Juneteenth became a phenomenal talking point, like it just was created 2 years ago, and I have so many people that look just like me that goes, "Oh yeah, Juneteenth," and I'm like, "You didn't even know what that was until social media." Some of them, and the reason why I bring that up is, all three of us on here are north of 30 years old. We remember when we wanted to find information, we had to go to this thing called a library. You had to check out about 10 books to find the one answer that you were looking for, and you learned so much by accident. Now you just Google it, or you go online and you Google it, and Dave's talking, and whatever Dave says, that's what I listen to. I didn't do my own research, or I don't listen to enough different people to kind of get a well-rounded thought process of what's going on. Why is the word race? Because I think that's the word in critical race theories that turns people off. Why are they so scared when they hear that word?
Well, I mean, first you have the misuse of the word, because now you've branded CRT, or critical race theory, as this thing of teaching children, which is not taught in K through 12, teaching children about race. Well, teaching about race, whether it was right or wrong, that's a whole nother matter versus critical race theory, which is talking about, again, those institutions. How is race taught in school? Is there a different way the curriculum's being taught toward children of different races? That's, when you're talking about examining the system, how do we look at it so that, again, it lends itself to critical analysis, so that we can say, hey, listen, if this is the problem, then this is how we fix it. But if we don't want to address problems, then we want to push it away and call it what it's not. Because I don't think you, I, or Dave will have a conversation with a second grader, and he or she may be able to tell us about, sentencing disparities in our criminal justice system. They're not going to have that conversation. So when we look at this whole thing, it's all about helping people understand not just what it is, but what it isn't. And I think this is where we missed the mark and allowed someone to co-opt critical race theory and take it in a totally different direction than it really exists.
Well, and I also, I'm going to keep circling back to the manufactured aspect of it, because first of all, no one teaches critical race theory in K through 12. This is a graduate level thing that no one's teaching. And now we should probably teach that, slavery, maybe we should acknowledge that. I don't know. Yes, we should. But, so there is the 1619 project that was out there that was addressing K through 12. However, think about critical race theory and where it comes up. It comes up very recently as an issue. It comes out of conservative media. UCLA and UC Berkeley they got like a 200-page report that I kind of scanned through because there was way more than I wanted to know about it. But they're saying that, it's coming from conservative media outlets that are talking about the issue. And I look at it and I say, look, before this, what were they worrying about? They were worrying about cancel culture. Well, the problem with being against cancel culture is that you have to defend the people who are canceled. So, right, you're going to defend Epstein, defend the indefensible in that position. I think critical race theory comes along and it gets into what they're interested in doing. They're interested in pushing back against whether you want to call it, James Carville called it radical wokeness, and he's a Democrat, right? That they perceive. But there's this idea of pushing back against that. And I think that Republicans are pushing back against something that their supporters are convinced exists. So we can tell them all day long that critical race theory is not being taught in school, but they're going to have this truthiness thing of there's something going on where my kids are being made to feel bad about being white or about being Asian or about, whatever. And that is, I think critical race theory just touched on that. And I think the very fact that like we're going to sit here and go, well, or I'm sitting here saying it's not taught. It's like, okay, then banning it isn't a problem, is it? Unless you're some, And so I think they also touched on an issue about parental control that is coming up and is vaguely related to mask mandates, and so they found just a really excellent political issue, and so they're not going to let it go because it's doing the job for them.
I feel like most people who have taught it in school, they weren't told they could do it, and they just went out on their. We all famously know what Jane Elliott did, correct? With their Blue Eyes Project and things like that. We all know what famously the backlash that she got. How dare you teach life's inequalities to my child? The nerve of you. So it's just a thing that baffles me. Like you said, it's not being talked, and what is the fear of it being banned? And you've both explained very well why there's so much animosity when it's told. And you've also covered my fourth question I was going to ask is, why is it important to have these discussions? And I want you guys to comment on something that I witnessed. When the O.J. Simpson documentary came out, I was sitting in a hot dog restaurant of all places, and it was on the TV. And there was a white male with his daughter sitting across from me. And they were watching it, and the daughter, she just looked extremely confused on why so many people that looked like me were celebrating when he was found innocent, even though half of us, or more than half of us, can tell you we thought he was guilty. And so she was like, well, why were they happy? And he explained to her, he said, well, when a community has gotten the wrong end of the stick so long, this was right after Rodney King, where we watched someone beaten half to death on video, and you would think they would be guilty and they were innocent, that the relief of someone finally seemed like they were winning was overwhelming. Is that sort of like what we're getting at when we talk about critical race theories, and that father explaining to his daughter, instead of just brushing it off and just saying some random nonsense, he actually broke down to her and cleared her confusion?
Well, for me, I guess I wouldn't see the OJ trial as a critical race theory situation in that vein. What I would look at is, for example, if OJ and another individual committed the same crime, one black, one white offenders, and then let's say the white offender got 2 years in prison, black offender gets 20 years in prison. Now we're dealing with sentencing disparities, because actually that happened here in Florida, where you had the same judge, 2 offenders of different races, but the white offender actually got 2 years and the black offender actually got 20 years. And then you had another similar situation in Texas. Again, same crime different crimes. One murdered 2 people, the other one murdered 10 people. Mm-hmm. The black offender that murdered 2 people got the death penalty. The white offender didn't get the death penalty. So when you're looking at dynamics of sentencing disparities and other things that transpire within the criminal justice system, you just had a young man who a couple of years ago, he's a teenager, just got off. The judge decided that he couldn't send him to prison for raping 4 young ladies. Now, those young ladies are now, the judge says he prayed about it and he felt led to give the guy 8 years probation and he could register as a sex offender. That was it. Meanwhile, the victims are now suffering even more from that. But had that offender been a black person, many people believe that he would have probably gotten not just the book, but the table, the chairs, and everything thrown at him, as a result of it. Now, I realize when we look at our systems are comprised of what? People. And many people have certain biases.
Right.
The key is trying to get people who are not biased to be fair and equitable based on the law as it is written.
Because we're told the law is not supposed to be biased, right? That's what we're told. We're taught law itself is not supposed to be biased, but yet we have biased people enforcing the law, and judges are supposed to be impartial.
Exactly. So, I'm sorry, didn't mean to capitalize.
No, you're fine, because I want to caveat to Dave on the topic that you're talking about, because this gets talked about a lot. We see offenders who are black, and then we see offenders who are white. Like when a police officer shoots an African American or a black person shoots someone, it seems like the media or someone goes so fast to dig up the history. Well, this person shoplifted and they did this and they hit their girlfriend. And then when we see the white gentleman who shoots up a church in South Carolina or any other white offender who shoots up something, the first thing they do is, well, they had a rough childhood, they were picked on, their mental health. Why does it seem like both of those take a drastic direction? And it's not, it's in part. Do you feel like that happens? Because that gets talked about a lot.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I was asking you, Dave.
Well, yes. I mean, definitely. I think we do see. You know, if a pretty blonde white girl goes missing, everyone knows about it. It's on the news, and I mean, just I mean, that is a huge. I think very much an issue, and I don't know that's more cultural. I think that gets away from the other issues of critical race theory, but I think that is a perpetual thing. But also, I hate to I'm going to bring this up.
Right.
Yeah.
African hair braiding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I worry about the systemic things, I mean, I absolutely do worry.
Right.
It's a shame. People are going to jail. Cops are shooting black people left and right. It's driving me crazy. But yeah, I'm going to talk about African hair braiding because how you make a living is important. And a woman who braids hair probably needs that money a lot. And so it sounds trivial, but this is one of these things. This issue, I think, goes to the questions, though, of economic, and largely unintentional systemic discrimination. And this has actually been an issue that to braid hair, right? In a lot of states, you needed a cosmetology license. And, this is ridiculous, right? And cosmetology licenses are very expensive. Most states, they require you to go through school. I've seen one analyst talk about, that it takes longer to get a cosmetology license than to be certified as an EMT, right? Which, think about that for a second. And the thing is that you're basically, by having this requirement that you have a cosmetology license to do this, you are keeping people from doing it. You're protecting the existing industry. This is the kind of thing that in my world we see a lot of. And like I say, it may not be race. Like the cosmetology license might never have been, no one who put that in might have ever thought about race, right? They might have been thinking about industry standards and protecting a group of holders, but it comes out and it disproportionately disadvantages the disadvantaged, the small. So it's going to, affect a lot of folks. And I think a lot of things in the United States go that way. I have never felt my white privilege as much as when I adopted my dog, right? And I went and I had to go through all these hoops and have all these people call references, have a video tour of my house, talk to my vet. And it was one of these things of like, and I know that I'm pretty sure that people who put the requirements for adopting the dog at the shelter, right? I really, really don't think these people are white supremacists in any way. However, I just was like, wow, I'm getting this dog. A lot of people couldn't. Maybe it's African Americans who couldn't. Maybe it's young people who couldn't, or just poorer people. And I was just sitting there, wow, I don't know if I could have gotten this dog 30 years ago. And so I think often in your analysis of these systems, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of unintended consequences that are very important and that benefit everybody when they're, when you blow things away, when you blow these discriminations away. I guess my point is that sometimes they're not intentional, or they're not even, aimed at a particular race, but they have a chilling effect. And this is the thing that I think is these are the kinds of things that are everywhere, and that's the kind of thing that on the economic side I'm very into looking at and doing away with.
Well, Harold, don't you think that circles back to people that make those decisions? If critical race theory was a thing that's talked about in their earlier stages, these things would come into their mind when they're making these plans or decisions?
Well, I mean, you have to realize as we evolve as a country, things are going to change. And as we see where certain problems lie, we should, or our elected officials should go back and make those necessary changes. As he alluded to, what we're looking at now, is, as Dave pointed out, it takes you longer to become a cosmetologist than it does to be a law enforcement officer. And now you have now a license, a badge, and a gun to kind of exert some level of authority, whether it's done correctly or incorrectly. And where my concern is if you can come right out of high school and join the police academy, and a few months later you're on the streets patrolling, and I've had candid and tough conversations with police captains, majors, and chiefs, as it relates to this, because I guess, my question to them was not really a question, more of a statement. I know, there are individuals on your force or under your command that are not doing the job correctly, but yet you continue to send them out daily rather than correct them first, which means you're no longer protecting and serving, you're endangering. And you don't send the same officers in communities of color than you do in affluent communities.
Right.
So there's a different mindset. It's almost like we get in the Marines, where I live, and you might get the Boy Scouts somewhere else.
Right.
Not to diminish them, because again, I have a lot of friends and family that are law enforcement, so we have these close conversations, and they shared many things with me that I can't say, but
Right.
Nonetheless, the reality is there is a problem. Race is at the heart of some of the problems, not all of the problems, some of the problems. And until we have those candid conversations, we won't be able to deal with the issue of race. And my thing, even with CRT, are we afraid that our children, because I just saw something last night where they were talking about Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges is in her 60s. And so what was pointed out is, one of the commentators said that what the problem with a lot of people now is experiencing is that they're afraid that their grandparents might be seen as those that were spitting on or spitting at or throwing rocks at Ruby Bridges, when they don't want that to be uncovered, or they don't want that to be seen and shared. So at the end of the day, race is something in this melting pot we call America that we're going to have to come to grips with and find a way to make it work for the best interests of everybody.
Okay, awesome. Those are great final thoughts. Harold, Dave, let's get your final thoughts.
Well, I think that, first, just one correction. It was an EMT, because I'm not sure that basic law enforcement, the BLET course, might be as long as the other. It was the EMT, get that.
Said, yeah.
But let us attempt to be tight with the facts. Other people aren't. We know this.
Right.
That would be the only reason I do that. I guess the big thing too, though, is that we all have a problem right now with identities, and as people are kind of, I think we are dealing with a lot of the issues that we need to be dealing with, but we're now getting the backlash from it, right? And the backlash is coming as a lot of people are finding their essential values, their things they know about the world, right? The belief that cops are good people, right? That America is this land of opportunity, and all these core ideas that let people that make up, I'm going to use the professor's term, it's ontological security, right? That ontology is about what you know exists. And sociologists say that ontological security, your understanding of what's in the world and how things work, is essential to your sense of security and being able to get through the world. And what you see is, as people are having a lot of these things questioned, they are going through, they're having some trouble with it. And it's not for nothing that the anti-critical race theory legislation is banning psychological distress. They're banning bad feelings. And we might say, oh, you sound like a bunch of snowflakes. You know, I'm sorry you feel bad about slavery and lynching. Right? What? And
Right.
I can see that being a valid reaction. But at the same time, hey, if you've had your ontological rug pulled out from under you, you do feel bad. You are worried. And this is, I think, that's the motivating thing on the Republican side amongst the Trump wing that we're seeing. And that's what we're having, I think, the biggest trouble with.
Uh-oh, you said one of those words that are going to make people not even hear anything you said. You said the T word, and now all of the educational and thoughtful things that you guys just said for 30 minutes is going to go in one ear and right out the other, because it's like that word race. You say one word, and nothing you say after matters because they're not listening. But that's not a loss for us. That's a loss for the people who don't like to be educated in these matters. Thank you guys for discussing critical race theories. It was a great show. I just want to leave everybody, I've always been told, if a conversation makes you uncomfortable, it's probably a conversation that you need to have. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you on the next one.